Hello and welcome to episode number 69 of the Knitting Teaspoon podcast. I'm Liesbeth, your host, and this is a podcast which is all about knitting, sewing, spinning, well, basically all the fiber crafts that I feel like. And this week there have been kind of two crafts, and I can finally tell you about the secret project that I've been working on. And basically both of my projects are kind of one project, though one is sewing and one is knitting, and I will try to explain how that all works. But there's one thing that you might already be able to see. I don't usually wear a lot of jewelry. That has a lot to do with the fact that I've been working with lasers over the past year. Not that I still do that, because I lost my job in July. Well, anyway, but there's a very exciting thing coming my way, and I already saw this coming, and that's why I already kind of started early on a project that officially couldn't yet be started, kind of. Anyway, last week on Saturday, my boyfriend asked me if I would marry him, so I obviously said yes, and we are now engaged to be married. And this is going to happen in January next, so before the baby is due. And well, that gives me a lot of fun time in trying to make my own wedding dress, which I am currently working on. And I couldn't kind of show you yet last week because we weren't officially engaged yet, and I didn't know when this was going to happen, but yeah, it happened last Saturday, so yay! And now I can start working on that. My boyfriend isn't here today. He has a very busy schedule for the coming, I think, next 4 Saturdays, so podcasting together unfortunately isn't, well, in the cards for us. But yeah, I didn't want to keep this for yet another month from you guys, so there it is. We are engaged, and it's very exciting and also kind of stressful because we want to get married before the baby arrives, and that means that we have a lot of things still to do. So things like picking out rings, and I'm working on my dress, and things like guest lists, and we want to keep it small, but especially because we want to keep it small, it's more, but it's somehow more difficult to where you draw the line of who's invited and who's not. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. And unfortunately my grandma is not that well currently. She's suffering from intestinal cancer, or actually she has some surgery for that, and I'm hoping that she will still be able to be there on January, but it's likely that we will have to do something with like a Skype setup so that she can like see our wedding, kind of be there, while not having to worry about not being physically capable of being there, because we live quite a bit away from my grandparents, which makes just the travel to us already quite difficult. Anyway, let's get started on what I've been working on. So let's start with the dress that I'm trying to sew. This I have not been working on before last week, but when I told my family that we were engaged, my brother's girlfriend immediately offered to help figure out some dress designs, because I mentioned that I was going to try and make it myself. So yeah. We decided that, or we have been chatting a lot about what kind of dress I wanted. So one thing was immediately clear: I wanted something with a waistline that was just on top of my pregnant belly. So that's because this is kind of a safe waistline that's going to kind of stay the same, and the rest of my belly is probably going to expand quite a bit before January, the coming 3 months basically. So yeah, we need something that will still be able to fit over that. So we were thinking of a circle skirt downwards, but then the big question is what happens on the top part. So we have been looking through a lot of dress pictures, and we decided that something with a model like this would be very nice. Karel, if you are watching, I know you don't want to see my dress, so please just skip this episode, okay? And probably all of the episodes until January, because this is going to take a while. Anyway, so yeah, I have something like a dress front like this, but then there, I don't know if you can see that, but it's kind of surplice neckline, or like a wrap dress front until the line for the belly. So it gives a V-neck, and it has some pleats for the dress. But there's one difficulty, and that is this dress pattern would fit quite well. We tried it. Tried to make it. Well, I obviously also have back pieces and other pieces for a dress like this, but this is meant for a woven fabric that is non-stretchy, and I do have a fabric that is stretchy for my dress. So yeah, I have already picked out the fabric. I don't have the fabric with me because my boyfriend doesn't want to see the dress before the day, so that's a little bit of a challenge, but I've asked a friend if we can sew together from now on, and I've left the fabric with her, and she luckily has quite a bit of space and said yes. So here is a tiny piece of the fabric that I just snipped off, and it's a stretchy fabric. I think it's mostly viscose, and there's some other kind of, well, non-natural fibers in there. I think polyester and elastin. I'm not sure if that translates like that to English, but anyway, it has a little bit of a shine to it, and yeah, it has quite some stretch, because I felt like that's the safe way to go, because I don't know exactly how my body is going to expand before January. And at first I didn't even know exactly when the date was going to be, so but now we know it's going to be the first half of January when we get married. So so now we have a pattern idea like this, and this is well, I hope you can kind of see it, but it's well, it's actually a garbage bag that we used for the pattern drawing, because that's what my brother's girlfriend likes to use as pattern paper. I usually use your traditional kind of pattern drawing paper for drawing my my pattern pieces, but this is well, just slightly different. But I want to make this shape out of a stretchy fabric, so that means that we've also decided that I would go and try to make a stretchy top that has kind of the same idea, and but it's quite different still, because I have this pattern pieces for a full kind of wrap like top, and it's a bit dangerous because I need to apply some stabilizer for the edge of the fabric so that it won't stretch out too much or start hanging open on this side like that, because you don't want that to happen with the stretch fabric. But this one falls all the way across the top of my belly, so and the other dress only falls like to somewhere here. So we were trying to figure out, based on making a top like this, how much we would need to adjust the other pattern piece to work in a stretch fabric. And I do have quite a bit of jersey fabric that I can use to kind of make a trial version of it. So yeah, I have this funny cloud fabric. I believe it's Megan Blue Fabrics. Worked with their fabric before. Made a sheepy shirt out of it, or actually two of those shirts. And yeah, I like this one because there's happy clouds, and some of them are raining, and some of them are just dry, and I just thought that was funny. So yeah, I'm trying to make a maternity top out of this, which has this full wrap, and going to try and see how much I should modify the other pattern to be made from a stretch fabric before I start cutting into the good fabric that I have for making the final dress. So it's quite a complicated process, and I believe this is just a top from the same Knippy magazine that I talked about last week, and it contains mostly baby patterns but some maternity patterns as well. And last week I thought it was this year's magazine, but it's apparently the 2018 one, but I don't think there actually is a 2019 one yet, or maybe it has come out since then, but then I haven't heard of it yet. So anyway, yeah, it's going to be quite a challenge to puzzle how this is going to work, and it's going to take probably most of my spare time. So I do have more pattern pieces, like here's the back side of the top, but it doesn't look particularly interesting, I guess, like this. It's been folded since I cut it, so most of the folds that are in there now weren't necessarily in there when I cut out the fabric, because you like to have your fabric as nice and neat as possible before you start cutting, because otherwise you have this chance of adding kind of unwanted wrinkles or, well, size differences to your fabric. Say there is some kind of fold on one side and it's not there on the other side, and maybe you end up with one side that's longer than the other side. Things like that. So you need to be careful when you cut out your fabrics. I haven't sewn a stitch on it yet because my brain space is somewhat lacking every now and then, and my throat is also a little bit sore. I think I'm going to have a cold, or actually yesterday I already felt quite bad, but today is a better day, luckily. Anyway, so let's move on to the knitting bit of my wedding dress, because this is the part that I've been working on the longest, because I knew that I wanted to have like a skirt that has a high waist, so above the belly, and because I was pretty sure that that was going to fit. And I started from the even star shawl pattern. So that's a pie shawl, and I do have the first pattern page, but I believe this is just the general information that you can just get if you look on the Ravelry page for this pattern without having purchased it. So I believe this is a quote from The Lord of the Rings, because that's what it's inspired by, but it's this pie shawl here, and I cannot help but think that this sunflower must have been a part of the inspiration as well. And the elves in The Lord of the Rings, one of them has this thing that's, I believe, is called the even star. So some of the lace in this shawl somewhat resembles the shape of this pennant here. So yeah, so this is the shawl that I'm kind of working on. So I am obviously knitting a skirt instead of a shawl, so I left out the center bit. So a pie shawl, you work from, or as far as I know, the pie shawls that I've seen, you work from the inside out and you work in circles, and the circles get bigger and bigger and bigger. But instead of the inner circle, I just cast on for a ribbing, and I have been knitting on a dress, so here it is. It's quite scrunched up on the needles. I have a cable that's 1 meter, so that's like 1 point something yards in circumference, and that's not a lot. But I cast on with a slightly heavier fabric, and I made a provisional cast on, and then I knit kind of a tunnel, and you can see it here. The first bit I just knit back and forth, and then after a while I joined in around, and the outside bit of the skirt I just knit in around. I added some beads to that as well, and I left a tunnel open so that I can put in some elastic when the time comes. So the yarn that I'm using is Lamana. Now I need to think. I think it's... I'm not sure. It's... well, I think this would already be called a lace weight, or at least a very light fingering weight. And it has, I believe, 10% cashmere in it, and 90% merino. And I put some beads on the ribbing, so it's a 3x3 ribbing that I did, and I just added some tiny beads, and I'm not sure to what extent you will be able to see them, but on every bit of the knit part of the ribbing there are some beads involved. And after I closed the ribbing, I switched to another type of yarn, and I know that that's Lamana Modena, and I purchased many skeins of this one, so and there's a lot of labels to get lost before I can't find a label of this one anymore. And I entered the details of this one into Ravelry, which I didn't do for the other one. So yeah, anyway, so this is a yarn, and it has 335 meters in 25 grams, so it's very light lace weight. So times 4, that means something like 1500 meters. That would be something like 1700 yards, I believe, to 100 grams. So it's a very lightweight yarn, and it's 70% merino and 30% cashmere. And yeah, so I tried to start following the even star pattern from there on out, but I knew that because my waist was going to be quite a bit bigger than the center part of the original pattern, which is just a shawl, I wanted to start with twice the number of stitches. So I did that, and also I added some beads to the pattern. So the pattern has some beading placement in it, but I believe all of that lace is in the final edge of the work, and not in the beginning lace. So it's going to be a little bit difficult to show you guys what this is going to look like. But there's first this kind of leafy lace that has this kind of claw-like structure in there, which I believe has some resemblance to the even star pendant. And then there is another section that is quite leafy, but this is going to have to be stretched out to such an extent that it will never fit on my needles. And yeah, I'm still working on it. I'm mid-row. Well, not that it does really matter a lot when you are working in around where you are. It's all very similar. And there's another leafy section, and there's this mesh, which I really like the look of. And then I am already on chart 3. If you happen to own the pattern, or have ever knit this pattern before, which I'm planning on extending. So the first chart I repeated it twice because I started wider, and I thought it would be nice to add in some extra length to kind of keep the amount of increases the same, because if this shawl kind of increases between charts and not within the chart itself, or not much anyway. So I also doubled the increases that way. So I thought it would be nice to just add in some extra length before I had this additional increase, which is going to be even heftier on my on my skirt than in the original pattern. And I'm now working on the third lace chart, which is partially a twisted rib and also kind of an open mesh, and also I've added beads here, which I hope will catch the light a little bit, but I'm not sure if they will show on camera, because unlike a lot of other podcasters, I can't see what I show you until I'm editing, so that's sometimes a little bit difficult. But this is obviously taking the most time, so planning out what I'm going to do with the dress that is going to go underneath this, it takes up quite a bit of time, but I'm hoping that, well, this skirt, I'm pretty sure that it will be finished in time, but I'm hoping to be able to knit some kind of short cardigan for over the top bit as well. It's going to be January, it's going to be cold, so a little bit of an extra layer would be very nice. And yeah, we will see how far I'll get with that, because we are on a tight deadline. And that's also why the baby knits have fallen a little bit to the waist side, because the baby is due end of February and our wedding is due in the first half of January, so wedding comes first. Anyway, so yeah, this is well, I've made quite a bit of progress on it over the past 3 weeks, and but it's slow progress because I have over 1,000 stitches on the needles right now, and yeah, knitting 1,000 stitches in itself takes quite some time, and if you have to knit them in a lace pattern, then it's going to take even more time. And I'm also adding some additional beads to this lace, and you guys, I don't know how I thought that this would be a smart idea, or where I would get the time from to be doing this, but well, I'm cutting away on all the other hobbies that I have, so video gaming is a bit low-key. It gives me some more time to work on or catching up with other podcasts as well, because I can knit while I'm watching podcasts, or yeah, kind of watching podcasts, mostly listening to other podcasts actually, because this isn't the kind of lace that you just, well, it's not the kind of knitting that you just repeat and know by heart, though it does help that I can repeat every pattern section like a million times, it feels like, before I'm to the end of the round. And now I'm also repeating a tiny chart several times going up, so yeah, you kind of know what you have to do, but still it's too involved to be constantly watching a series or podcast or something like that. So yeah, it's slow and steady going, but yeah, I'm really enjoying it, and I think so far it looks really pretty, and I'm really curious to see what it looks like if I would stretch it all out and block it, because this shawl is going to need quite some aggressive blocking, I believe, and in the end. And well, you may be able to see I'm at this round now where there's this kind of, well, I don't know how to describe this kind of shape, kind of house-like shape. I say rectangle with a point on top of it. Anyway, yeah, I'm working on that bit of this pattern, and I am modifying as I go, so I'm sticking mostly to the pattern, but I'm repeating some things extra, and I'm adding beads to the lace as well, and I hope that I have enough beads, because I only had ordered 10,000 of them, and I know according to the pattern I will need at least 6,000 in the edge of the shawl or the edge of the skirt in my case, and I have already added over 1,000 so far, so I'm not really sure. Like, I can add up to 4,000 beads in the rest of the skirt and be fine. But then again, if I want to knit some kind of cardigan top, I probably want to repeat the bead part on there, so who knows. I might run out, but then again I can just order more, because these beads, they come from a shop. It's a Dutch shop where you can buy beads, but I would really recommend it if other Dutch knitters are also working with beads on their yarn. It's a Creadream, and they have a lot of filters that you can use, which I really like. So you can select for the size and the shape and the color and the kind of finish of the bead. So do you want it transparent, or do you want it opaque? Do you want it to have a certain pearl-like shine, or does it have to be, well, I don't know. There's so many filters that you can select, and it just works amazingly well. And there's so many websites that I wished had this level of being able to filter down well, to exactly what you're looking for. Even, well, Ravelry is quite similar in that sense, I think, but Ravelry is somewhat more confusing because a lot of patterns have multiple options, which makes it less clearly visible. This site has great photographs, it has great filters, and it just works so incredibly well. So I was very happy using it. So that's not endorsed, just a fan. I wish more websites were like this. So yeah, it's a joy to be working with the beads. And one thing I must say is that the beads are supposed to have a 0.8 millimeter hole in the middle, and most of them, I believe, probably do have this kind of hole, but I am using a crochet hook to add the beads. So what I do is I pick up a bead with a crochet hook, I take off one stitch of the left hand needle. Oops, dropping stitches. So I take off one stitch of the left hand needle, and I with the crochet hook, and I slide a tiny bead on there, and then I knit the stitch. So the bead is not going anywhere after I've done that. I cannot really show you guys, but I will just take off a loop with the crochet hook and just shift the bead that's already on the crochet hook over both of the loop, over the entire loop, so both legs, and then shift the loop back on the left hand needle and knit the stitch. So that's how I add my beads to the yarn. And I tried to do something like that before, and I had a 0.75 millimeter crochet hook for it. But it turned out that didn't quite work all of the time. So I had about maybe 5% of the beads that had a hole that was too tiny to get through with hook. Now I have a 6 millimeter or 0.6 millimeter crochet hook, and that works just fine. So I have been able to get through all of the holes so far, and I must have placed at least 1,000 beads, and it's all worked fine. So you may need to use a slightly smaller crochet hook, and obviously there's multiple sizes of beads. So if you were working with a bigger yarn or thicker yarn, then you might want to use bigger beads, and therefore also use a bigger crochet hook, which is also nice if you have to catch a thick yarn with just a 0.6 millimeter crochet hook, that's going to be a little bit tricky because it's likely that you will just catch like one ply maybe, or even less than that, and kind of pull your yarn apart. Whereas I'm using such a thin yarn that it works fine. Well, anyway, tangent, I think. But I'm really enjoying the process of it. Although sometimes I feel like, I kind of wish I was knitting on something easier, but then again, I really, really, really want to have this finished in time. So, yeah. Yeah. So I think that's everything that I had to share with you this week. And I really hope that you enjoyed this podcast. And well, thank you so much for joining me. It really means a lot. And I hope you guys all have a lovely week. And I hope to see you again next week. Bye!